All right, let's look at inventing the future and just kind of final thoughts on it. I give a little bit of this in the wrap, and certainly a lot during the playthrough. My overall feeling about games like this is that they kind of serve as either a filler or what I like to call coffee house games that I'd like to take it to, a place where I'm kind of just enjoying the atmosphere while I'm playing it. It's not that the decision making isn't enough to, capture all my thinking if I want to play it very competitively. It's got more to do with there not being a great deal of story in the game. And obviously that's not really, where my strongest and favorite games tend to lie. Although there are some lighter things, some card games even, like Bridge and such, not that I really, and poker, that I really love, that don't have a lot of story to them. However, a game of this nature isn't going to really compete with, the classic card games for me. Because I don't know why. Because even when there's more maybe decision points or something, it's not going to replace them. It's not going to compete with them. It just becomes sort of an alternative that can fill that same gap, but will never be as well loved. Yeah. Maybe just that I'm used to the card games. So, with this one, the first thing you notice is you don't really need a lot to do the print and play side of things. You just need, a few of these sheets for each player. I guess it's supposed to hold 5 players. Cards, which are, pretty easy to make. I could have actually generated the materials that are specific to the game. But it does require kind of a heavy investment in little cubes and other pieces. Certainly you can probably scavenge these kind of pieces from other games or go out and purchase them specifically. And, I'm glad Rick put together a set for me of all the pieces I'd need for it, because I'd have a hard time finding, say, 30 of each cube or whatever. I guess I could have used coins or colored pieces from other games or something, but it would have been tough for me to do. So there is a certain investment in that. I don't know where one gets little wooden cubes that are colored. I assume that some of the game things like GameCrafter or some such could put them together. The game itself seems perfectly interesting. The fact that the little deck of how the different advances progress, etc., is enough to make sure that you're never going to be facing the same game coming out. Being able to control them coming out is, I should say the one thing, is an important factor. The one thing I really should say early on in this is I totally screwed up an important role in the game. And that made me play a different game that was enjoyable. Very similar, but as is often the case with me, I missed a line, essentially, as I was playing. And it was the first playthrough. I missed important things in other games. But you're getting kind of a feel for the game that is not the game that was intended to be written. The game that was intended to be written had a different sort of line of restrictions. Essentially what I missed was you're only allowed to play one of your little action selection markers in any given row in the game. And what that means is that essentially all of these get played out each time. So that actually kind of speeds up the game. My game probably took a little too long. It also creates some different kinds of decision making in terms of, well, do you really want to use the green die to increase public financing by 1, when maybe you could get it to 2 on a different die, or maybe you're more interested in private financing or whatever. You can't end up focusing on one. As a variant, though, it played pretty well. I felt like it had one little feature that I think may have hurt it as a variant, which was I feel that the order of play was more problematic in terms of giving an advantage to a certain seat. The guy who gets to make the last choice, basically, and who gets the first play in terms of getting the bonuses from here. It made that a more important position than it otherwise would be. And that I actually saw as a flaw in the game that I was playing, and thought that maybe there's a need, although I talked myself out of it, to kind of maybe have some kind of order selection added to this as an option. I think that largely would dissipate by the rules as written, because you would only have, being in that position only gives you one opportunity up here to get the bonus and trump in on people. This is the one thing that you can kind of, one person has the ability to get this extra bonus in addition to triggering the action that's there. On the other hand, it was kind of interesting to play a game, and I thought an interesting factor to the game as I was playing it, that didn't necessarily cause all 4 of the actions to occur. If you're playing a 4-player game of this, generally I would say all of these get triggered. It's not an absolute guarantee, because multiple people could be in the same slot here, and then it is possible that some of these wouldn't actually occur. The decision making seemed to revolve around making these choices between the dice you're presented, but you have a lot of flexibility in setting yourself up so that your dice allocation machine, if you like, can be modified. You have these specialists who allow you to change the dice. And they're limited in number. In a game that's over 3 players, well, there's only 3 of each of these. So not everybody's going to get one of them, but you have the ability to steal them from other people. Or if you're due to get one and you want one that is not available on the board, you get to steal it. So there's a lot of movement as to how, if those become valuable, or if those are valuable at a given time, I think all of them have some worth, then you have this ability to kind of grab them away from people. And of course you can take them from the leader, or the perceived leader at the time. So there's actually a decent amount of play in here to be able to screw people over. There's a few different ways you can do it. One is by just stealing their workers. Another is by triggering payday events when their funding isn't sufficient, so you can kind of drain them down. We didn't see a lot of this happening. There were places where it looked like it might happen, but the problem was, in the game that I was playing, perhaps because I allowed people to play more than once per row, that funding was fairly easily obtainable. I don't think that was a terrible flaw. I think it worked pretty well. You still had to make the decision to concentrate on funding, which is something which almost automatically is going to happen if you have the 1 per row limitation, because, well, if you have 5 wings, which you would in most games, you need 1 for each row, and no matter what, this is going to either increase your funding or increase your actual capital that you have available with these other chips. So I don't know if the added flexibility of allowing people to play multiple times in the same row particularly affected the cash flow in the game. Let me think what else. Anyway, it definitely had a reasonable feel in terms of the kind of decision making, in terms of being faced with a changing puzzle. Just because you've got those replay with the changing cards. What other people do, what they choose to select for dice, can affect not only what they're going to get, because they get first choice, and if they have, one of these consultants and troubleshooters, they can change a die. So they're maybe not too restricted as to what they can pick, but they can choose their dice in such a way. Now, you get one of each color to begin with, but you get to choose one additional die. They can choose that additional die in such a way that it kind of makes it less likely that people are going to pick a certain color of die or whatever. You can kind of target their ability to choose. Now, of course, if they have the consultants or troubleshooters, they may be able to reach in and change the numbers to better suit their needs. But again, those are a limited number of pieces of that sort. What else do we have? Now, again, this isn't the kind of game that, I'm going to want to play again and again and again. It's the kind of thing that I would want to... I can see two ways to use it. As kind of a filler, I like longer games. I think this one clocks in at under an hour easily. I know modern gamers are more into the lighter stuff, so they might be thinking an hour. Well, that's a fairly decent sized game. Yeah, okay, but and as sort of that kind of easy to travel game, and that's where I came up with the idea. Instead of printing these on paper, if it ever comes out to a published set, or if there's a way that people can do this, and I don't know, I don't know enough about being able to print on strange textures and stuff, but obviously there would be a way to get it printed on a cloth background, a heavy cloth like burlap or something like that, because that would allow you to kind of roll it up and fit it into a tube or some other device that you can just throw that doesn't require the amount of space that this sucker takes. Of course, you could also mount it on a kind of harder board so that it folds once, and then it becomes, a more reasonable size. Or you could print it smaller. I mean, but that would get kind of difficult to play on because your little winks are, nicely fitted to the size of the board. Cut the boards in half. That would be the same as folding it, I guess. Yeah, and there's certainly enough decision points, enough little clever different ways of taking your strategy. There's this sort of natural pacing to the game where early on you're looking for certain colors. Although you can see one sometimes hits red, but you're usually looking for white and blue in the first side. This sort of spreads out a little bit more, maybe. A little bit more towards blue, at least, in the second deck. And then in the third deck, reds become, and this is the most advanced where you finally go, you have to have more reds. So you have to kind of make this decision of how much you want to invest in, advancing broadly or pushing something forward. And then you can, what we saw was in my play was you could push something forward in the red zone and still lift things up that you had left behind fairly easily, kind of even things out that way. The way the points go, it's to your advantage to make it to the higher levels. The points are worth a little bit more, but sometimes it can be kind of hard. What I felt was the middle area was actually the hard place to get through, because a lot of the cards seem to require a decent number of blue pieces. And then when you get up here, some of them actually required whites with reds. Like I said, there was one of them. There was a first level red card as well. But basically your whites have become useless by this point if you're all looking to go into the third level. So you kind of have to balance out, what your workers are worth, etc. Of course, you could take a financial failure and not support your funding levels enough and not support your current capital enough so that you're able to discard some of your white cubes when you no longer need them because you can't afford to pay for them. How much does that help you? Well, you're playing it really close to the line, right? Of course, that's what you want to do optimally in any game, is not spend on extra crap. But personally, I usually like having a little bit of leeway and not make everything come down to the dime, because you can't predict enough, or at least I don't think I could, within this game. The fact of the matter is you don't know what dice your opponents are going to pick, so you don't know what you're going to be presented with. You don't know what's going to be available to you to choose. It could be that you have the consultant, who allows you to pull an out-of-play die, but other people with the consultant could have used up those dice. There's a limited number of out-of-play dice, one in each color at most. One of the colors isn't going to have it anyway, so you can never really guarantee that you can do what you want if somebody else is rolling the dice. If you're rolling the dice, you can pretty much arrange it through the consultant or the troubleshooter that you know that you'll get what you want. Early on, you don't have those tools, but you probably have more flexibility as to what you want. Anyway, I found this pretty interesting for the type of game that it is. And certainly at Print and Play, it's not going to cost you a lot to put it together in sort of a minimal variety where you're just printing it on paper. You could use, there's a heavier stock on here, but you don't even need that really. You could use paper for that, maybe slip it in card sleeves. The hard part, though, is coming up with these, and then kind of, if you have them, sorted into other games, and you're taking pieces from other games, that gets to be kind of a difficult procedure. So it's probably worth, paying the couple of bucks to get yourself some cubes, however you manage to get that. Pawns, you can probably, use little bits of hardware or something. Obviously, I needed $40 for the game. I was able to get that into play with 40 cents. That's pretty cheap. And such not. There's really, you can really put this together without too much expenditure from just stuff you have lying around without a problem.